somebody else who has a different opinion about truth and wants to talk to us about it next here is Daniel has spoken from Australia, calling into the show, wanting to know about what my truth is, what would change my position. Not sure. Daniel has spoken from Australia. Tell me more about that.
Hey, I would like to, in the world, there's hundreds of opinions. The spectrum is really wide about how people relate to truth, okay? So what I would like to know is, what is your type of truth that is going to convince you or move you to change your position about...
Change my position on what, God?
That you currently don't believe. Sorry?
Oh, just anything, or what? Like, are we talking about God or what?
Type of truth? Yeah, in relation to God, what is the type of truth that you're looking forward to, or what is the kind of evidence that you're looking forward to change your position about God?
It's a great question. I mean, it depends on the God, right? So different gods have different God claims. So are we talking about an omnipotent, good God of the universe that is kind of outside of us somehow, but can also communicate with us? Or if we're talking about like some more local deities, they might have different claims to their existence, right? Overall, if something exists, they're going to have an effect on the world, right? And I want to be able to see that effect. I know JL exists because he's talking to me, through the computer here. One day that's going to be harder when AI becomes more prevalent and stuff, right? But for now, I'm pretty confident, this is JL talking to me and through me. Not through me, but to me, right? There's some people that say God. There's some people that say God talks through them.
Let us do one at a time. I would like to know what local deity on earth do you find truth in? Like, what local deity do you find is worthy enough to pay attention to?
Well, I don't find any worthy enough to be like pay attention to or think are real. My point was more that.
Why do you even bring it up? What is the point of even bringing
if you let me
up?
finish, I'll tell you the reason why I brought it up is because not everybody thinks of God the same way. Some like when they talk about God being on God's being on Mount Olympus. Mount Olympus is a place, like you can go to it. You can go to the top of it, right? And having it, a lot of Native American cultures have gods that affected their material world and physical geography around them. You see that a lot in different culture stories, right? So there's different gods that have different material effects on the world. In Christianity's case, God comes through us through the Holy Spirit, and through the Holy Spirit, certain acts are done, certain miracles can be performed. That's just an example. There's other things that tie us to God, but that's one that's very clear and one we could examine. But it seems like every time we do examine miracles that allegedly come from God, they seem to fall apart pretty much every single time we look at them. So that's one reason why it makes it hard. If there was like actual miracles that we could verify, perhaps if we actually saw human beings walking on water, for example, I'm not going to say I'm going to be a Christian right there, but it's going to move the needle for me, right? So there's a couple different examples we could go with.
No, you didn't really understand my premise. That's exactly why I asked you, what is your truth? What is your truth that's going to convince you about your previous position, right?
No, you asked me what would convince me of God. That's not
reference to.
No, that's different though, because it depends on the claim. It depends on the God claim. That's my point, right?
Daniel, do you have a specific God in mind that you're talking about? Are you specifically talking about the Christian God, or are you just talking about like a classical deistic entity? Like which one are you actually referring to?
Hello, Daniel, you there?
I did talk to Dan previously.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, go ahead and talk, please.
No, go ahead. He asked you a question.
Yeah, I was asking you a clarifying question.
So what I'm saying is, like, I'm interested actually to know what is your position about the truth or about the kind of evidence that you will be open to and deeming it as worthy enough to engage in and having your position changed on God. So what is the kind of truth or evidence that you're looking forward to?
Well, so one, you kind of didn't listen to JL's question. That's fine, because this was the original. Not saying it's fine. He shouldn't interrupt you, JL. But that is your original question that you're trying to ask us, and we're just gonna have to repeat the point again that like it depends on the claim. It depends on the claim. It really does, and that's it's not a fun answer to hear, but it has to be because some God claims are different than other kinds of God claims. That's what it is at the end of the day, you know? So you'd have to be more specific.
No, my position is that I'm asking a question to you about knowing your own position about the truth that
and I gave you my position,
God, right?
And my
But
position is that I need to know more about the specifics.
Market for different sort of gods in the world. What is your own?
Yes.
Daniel, can you hear me?
Hello.
Ozzy.
Hello.
Oi,
Yeah,
something like that. Yes. Okay. So Dan, so you can hear me. Okay. So this is important.
Yeah.
I have an answer to your question. Okay. You're asking what evidence would I accept that would convince me? All right. So, but what Dan over here is trying to do is he's trying to get more specifics from you, like because if you're talking about like a classical version of like classical deism. Classical deism is just a nondescript entity that was powerful enough to like kick the football on the universe, and then that's it. And then it left with no evidence of its existence. It doesn't interact with anything. It just made everything. And
the idea of classical deism.
I'm not done.
Let him finish, please.
The idea of classical deism.
Daniel, I'm not done.
I will mute you unless you let him finish, please. Thank you.
That's an unfalsifiable concept. All right. So obviously the evidence would be different, than say if it was the Christian theistic God, which has a whole bunch of logical entailments that come along with it. All right. So if you're talking about two different categories here, we need to know which category you're referring to so that we can answer honestly and accurately.
The Abrahamic God.
Okay. So the Christian God. Fantastic. So the Christian God is the one you're talking about.
Not the Christian God, the Abrahamic God.
The Christian God is the Abraham. The Christian God is the Abrahamic God. The Christian God is the Abrahamic God. It's a version of it. Okay, it's not the Muslim one. It's not the Jewish one. But you would talk about. Doesn't matter. That particular that Hebrew storm God, whatever. Okay, however you're defining it. The reality is this. That worldview is theistic, meaning that God exists and it interacts directly with everything, with the world in whatever way. If the God is interacting with things, then we would be able to determine that it exists by either detecting indirectly or directly what its actions were. That's important because we need to be able to know what a God action is as opposed to what a God action is not. All right. Otherwise, if we can't tell the difference, then we can't say that the God interacts with anything because they all look naturalistic to us. Okay, we don't want to beg the question here. So if the God does exist and it interacts with the world, then the best evidence that you could give me would be a predictive model that utilizes the God concept in order to make better and more accurate predictions about reality than any of the naturalistic ones that we currently employ.
Right. This is why I said if people and only Christians were able to have the ability to walk on water, if I tried and I couldn't do it, but Christians were able to do it, there is something happening there, right? There's some variables we can account for and examine. And I'm sure people could come up with better examples. This is just what I'm coming up with on the top of my head. But the point is, I'm exactly in agreement with JL. If you want to know my opinion, yes, the Christian God or the Abrahamic God, both, doesn't matter. Interact with the world, interact with the material world, makes material changes to the world, and therefore can be examined through material processes. You have to, right? If you're seeing something, that's through the material, right? If you're touching something, that's through the material. I want to be able to know that. And that's going to be what would change my mind. Yeah.
Okay, then therefore ask Don about what he has thought about the world history changing prophecy that I discussed with him last week, and what is his opinion now? Has he thought about it now, or is he even considering that to be evidence good enough for him to change his position?
Well, you called me, so I need to give context because people are confused. You called me when I was on Atheist Experience last Sunday, and you brought up the prophecy in Daniel. And you said it was referring to the end of the world. Well, sorry, I disagree with you because you said it wasn't referring to the end of the world. I said that it was, and that's how we know that it's false because the world hasn't ended based on its interpretation. So we just have different interpretations. But yeah, again, biblical prophecy, actually, this might surprise you, actually doesn't have anything to do with God in a way, right? Because God is kind of a separate concept from whatever the Bible says. The Bible could be absolutely false and God could still be real, right? So we have to be able to evaluate God separately than what prophets claim in the Bible. That's,
Daniel
that's
to
kind of
be
a
the
different
prophet
thing.
of God.
He claims to be the prophet of
Do you
God,
think
sure.
Daniel, the figure of Daniel, is considered to be a prophet of God in the Bible?
He's considered to be a prophet of God. That's the claim.
Okay, so he had something to say. He had something to say to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. He interpreted the dream for him, right? And this dream is a world history-changing event.
No, it's not. It was no way. Hang on a second. The dream that he was interpreting, he interpreted in the context of the time period that they were living in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. The different entities that were applied to the different creatures that appeared in that dream, okay, all represented things that they were currently aware of.
Yeah.
All right. But ultimately, the prophecy did not come true. That prophetic dream didn't happen. So therefore, Christians now go back and they look at that and they try to reinterpret that to fit whatever situation is going on currently in the world. It's like, oh, it didn't mean Rome because they on their standard was an eagle. It meant America because our standard is an eagle. No, because it meant like, the H-man's army, like whatever. People have been doing this for centuries.
Yeah.
Okay. Trying to reevaluate the things that didn't come true to fit them to the time periods in which they live in order to continue or justifying believing that they will happen.
Yep.
You have to become very specific, okay? I ask you to become very specific. Go to the dream interpretation that Daniel makes to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, it was the statue with the multiple different types in the feet. Yes,
I'm very specific. I'm very specific where Prophet Daniel interprets the dream of the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, okay? Just focus on that bit. Focus on that passage and tell me how does God of the heaven is not involved in bringing about the changes that he so desires to see on the face of the earth.
Okay, that's a claim. That's a claim that can't be verified. So the Bible is telling you a story about a person who was claimed to be a prophet interpreting a dream of a king who lived at the time. All right, that person could have literally just been interpreting a dream the way they thought. All right. If the individual Daniel existed as depicted, and they believed that the God existed, and they were a faithful individual to that religion, and then they were interpreting the dream in a very specific way to Nebuchadnezzar, it doesn't mean say that event actually took place. It doesn't mean the God exists. Okay. It doesn't mean that the God exists as David believes it does. All right. Or Daniel believes it does. So the problem with this is that there's a whole bunch of assumptions that you're making here. All right.
Comes true.
But it didn't come true. But it didn't come true. That's
the
problem.
I argued with you on Sunday. I don't think the prophecy actually came true. Do you know why? Because the prophecy says the end of the world happens, and the world's still here. That's what they like.
You have a very wrong understanding of the prophecy. You got to open the Bible and
read the
prophecy for yourself.
Don't we always?
And it is not an apocalyptic prophecy. It is not apocalypse, guys.
But it is. It
is apocalyptic. It is apocalyptic because because the revelation of John actually harkens back to it. Okay, those ideas spread. All right, they were just changed over time between the decades when these books were written. All right, so no. You have to look at the historical context and the time and place in which that dream was interpreted, which the story was being told. All right. When that particular event did not take place, when what was happening, what was predicted to happen or prophesied to happen, however you want to say it, didn't take place, Christians have gone back to that text and attempted to reinterpret it. Well, if it didn't happen then, that's why you now have people nowadays in contemporary society interpreting that dream to reference the nations that exist today. I can guarantee you, dude, Daniel was not talking about the United States of America, Russia, Iran, or any other country out there that exists now. They were talking about organizations, governments and countries that existed then.
You're right. I agree with you. Okay, I agree with you. So what I'm saying, what I'm trying to say is, that particular dream talked about a particular string of events that were predicted to happen, and they were realized. So as per the dream, Babylonian Empire was to be replaced by the silver-chested empire. So whichever empire replaced Babylon, that became the silver-chested empire. So it was in history. If you see, the Persians became the silver-chested empire, and then.
But you see how not specific that is, though. Like any empires rise and fall all the time in history. Like the interpretations of who actually is the different metals like in there is an after the fact, post hoc justification for these. It's not. It shouldn't be convincing to you to think that everything is real and God is real and all these other stuff.
What I recommend is you need more time to delve into this prophecy and to figure out.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's I recommend that you go look at what Bible scholars have said about this work and understand that Daniel is a post-Babylonic text, meaning it is post the occupation of Babylon. There are later interpretations of that text that are filled into the story because it made sense to the people at the time, right? And this is true for not just Daniel, but in other parts of the Bible. It doesn't demonstrate any future predictive abilities really at all. All it says is what people thought about these civilizations at the time of the writing. Okay.
Well, and Daniel, I just want to throw in there real quick. Okay. When I mentioned a predictive model, okay, you going back to a story that was written centuries ago, millennia ago, is not going to be a predictive model, okay? Because the only way we can interpret that is through we'd literally be doing the fallacy of post-diction on this one. It's nothing but post and ad hoc rationalizations. There's no way to interpret that in exactly the way, because we don't have access to Daniel, okay? He's not here to talk about it or this. So if, like I said, the evidence that I would accept would be a predictive model that yields new information about reality that incorporates the God concept into it. Okay, yeah. That's the evidence that I would, because that would at least tell us at minimum that there is something interacting with the world in at least an indirect way.
Right. If we're talking about prophecy, we might as well be arguing about poetry. Like it's just going to be subjective interpretations all day, every day. That's not good enough for a God belief. We need more than that.
Okay, now this is where I'm getting at. So what is it exactly? What more do you need? What is the type of evidence that you would go on to consider to change your position?
I just gave it to you.
Yeah, we already answered this.
I just gave it to you.
It has to be predictable, has to be more objective than prophecy. Good God. I mean, or at least if it's going to be a future predictive event, I mean, he's already, Jay already talked about this. It has to be specific, right? There has to be a much more specific language there. And also we can't talk about, it has to be something new. It has to be something that we can actually see the before and after for, not just the after, which is what we're always going to be doing when we look at the Bible.
It's also really important to remember that a lot of problems with the Bible and the biblical prophecies, I hate using the air quotes, is that most of it is post-diction, is that you had individuals who were alive at the time who were well aware of the prophecies that were made by people, decades or centuries before them. And then there were individuals that took steps to bring those things about. Okay, if someone lays down what they call a prophecy, they prophesize something's going to happen, and then that information gets passed along through the generations till one person comes along in that group and they see it and say, I want this to happen because the outcome of this would be great. I want to see this outcome. And then they actively take steps to make it come true. It automatically eliminates that as prophecy.
Dreams are like interpreting dreams is like the worst way to do that too, by the way.
I'm asking you to give. What is your type of truth? What is your type of evidence that is going to?
We gave it to you. We answered that.
I already answered that. Show me a Christian who can walk on water, and that'll move the needle for me at least. I'm not saying I'll be a Christian, but
Novel testable predictions, bud.
Yeah.
You give me a predictive model that can make better and more accurate predictions about reality, utilizing the God information. Plug the God concept into any predictive model and have it make better, more accurate, more far-reaching, and to yield new information. Okay, that's what a novel prediction is. Plug that in. Give me that predictive model.
If a Christian prays for me and I don't have to wear contacts anymore because my vision's perfectly clear, that'll do something for me. You know, if you're looking for big tangible stuff like that, sure, that would move it.
As soon as they landed on, you know the people of Moses who saw the Gulf of Aqaba split.
According to the story,
I know a story. Yes, it's a story.
As soon as they crossed, they sinned against God. They worshipped the cat.
Yeah. And there's another text extra biblical from Daniel where Daniel talks to a dragon. Did you know that?
So how is it going to help you, man? I mean, even if
Daniel, you've got to listen. You got to actively listen there, dude. I'm not trying to disparage you, man, but you've got to actively listen. We've answered your question a number of times. Both Dan and I, I'm not done. Dan and I have both answered your question. You continuously appealing back to the Bible is not going to further this conversation because you're talking about stories that that you're interpreting in a specific way that sometimes the way I've heard biblical scholarship does not agree with you. So in that respect, don't keep going to the Bible because the Bible is just a bunch of stories. Okay, if the God exists, the Bible can be wrong. So the thing of contention here is, does the God exist? What would convince us? I can guarantee you, dude, I'm telling you right now, the Bible is not going to convince us because the Bible was the number one instrument as to why I am currently an atheist. Because the Bible is, for lack of a better term, a shit book. Okay, so if you give us that that predictive model that elicits new information, novel testable predictions about reality, utilizing the God information, I will at least be able to then confirm that the thing exists or something exists that is interacting with the world in a way that allows us to understand reality better. That is the evidence that you were asking for.
Yep.
Okay?
Unmuting you there now, Daniel. Go ahead.
You talk so enormously, man. I mean, you're talking a lot. Okay, now listen to me.
Well, I scored high on my verbal, so what do you want?
Anthropological evidence. There is anthropological evidence across.
There's anthropological evidence. There's anthropological. Sorry, Daniel. There's anthropological evidence. No. There's anthropological evidence that there are people who believed these things.
Yes.
That does not get you to a God.
Yep.
I want to hijack this. If you let me finish. Let me finish.
That's hilarious because you've been interrupting us this entire conversation. But yeah,
you're the one who's hijacking the whole conversation, talking endlessly.
Yeah, it's my show, dude. I can do what I want. But also, listen, like I already talked to you about this. I don't owe you anything. Right? Like we've already given you an explanation. Everything at this point is just like whatever you're coming up with right now. And I don't know if I'm interested in it, honestly. Like we've given you examples. You don't seem interested in those examples. You want to keep pushing your examples because you think your examples are really good and we think they're really shit. So like, what else can we get from here? Right?
But you wanted me to you dragged me into the Bible. I asked you one simple question. I asked you, what is your type of evidence? What is your type of truth that is going to convince you and persuade you?
This is how I know you're not listening. This is how I know you're not listening. I am interrupting you. And here's why. We literally just said to take the Bible out. We said the exact opposite of what you're talking about right now. We rip up the Bible. It doesn't matter. The Bible's not the only book that's ever made claims about God. There's all kinds of things out there that have made claims about God. God should be separate from the Bible. We can talk about God and what he's done without ever looking at it, right? And that's what we should be able to do if we want to know that a God exists. We have to be able to test him, or at least test the claims about him, right? Outside of what people have written about him 2,000 years ago.
Anthropological evidence. What do you have to say about the anthropological evidence that's there in humanities? What is your objection to that?
I think the anthropological evidence suggests that the God of the Bible is the result of early Canaanite tribes who believed in multiple gods, right? Not just one single God, but Yahweh was singled out after a number of period of years, whose wife was Asherah, right? Who also gets incorporated in the Bible in weird ways. It eventually turned into a monotheistic religion. I actually think that's what anthropology says, by and large, about the history of the Abrahamic God. What do you think it says?
No, that's there in the world, like among all the communities, like ancient communities, like communities that lived in Amazon forest or in Australia, everybody seemed to have a relationship with the agency and the creator.
Oh, hey,
right?
hey, actually, I'm going to stop you again because
even
that
the-
actually is evidence to our point that none of them have ever said Jesus, have they? Or Yahweh, right? The Aborigines didn't know Christianity, neither did the Amazonians. If anything, that lends credence to the idea that God is a local deity, a local belief constrained to time and place, right? Not omniscient, not everywhere. It's just, you are absolutely
We are
proving
not
my
going
own
back
point
to the
here.
God of the Bible now, just because you insisted. So let's talk about the anthropology
God.
across the globe.
Hey,
Let's talk
I don't think
about,
you actually give a shit about what I'm
make a
saying.
reference
So
to the
I
Bible
think I'm just
again.
going to end this call here, honestly. Really getting tired of this. We're not, like, your name is Daniel Has Spoken. You want to talk about prophecies from the Bible, and then you get mad that we brought up the Bible, even when we said we don't need to bring the Bible into this. So I don't know what you want. I don't know what you want. But that's it. I don't know. We're done with that call.